Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and now TikTok at Hawk Blogger. We're everywhere, whether you want us to be or not. We are there. Give us a follow at TikTok. We're up to over 500 followers. We just started this week. Want to get to 1,000 so we can be live there as well. Would appreciate a quick follow if you wouldn't mind. And it's a Blue Friday. It's a fun Blue Friday. Not only do the Seahawks have a massive game on Sunday night against the Green Bay Packers, which we will definitely talk about, but we've got Dave Boling and Mike Sando back together to make it a treat. I can't tell you guys how many folks just are like, when are Dave and Mike coming back on? That is our favorite show. We love hearing from those guys. So how are you doing, Dave? Well, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. People must be hard up for entertainment.
Oh, they are. They absolutely are. Always. I actually was thinking about you the other day when, actually just last night when I was watching the Rams play the 49ers, and I was like, what would Dave Boling, the poet that he is, how would he write about this game? Because that was one of the grossest games I've seen in a while. Do you have
Brian, I can tell you. I can tell
Okay.
you how he would. Let me look up the stories that he wrote about the Seahawks in the early '90s. I can tell you that.
That's a good point.
There was one game that they'd had so many losing efforts that I was running out of words. So I brought a thesaurus before you had all the internet online, and I had a thesaurus with me. And I say this team was crummy, and then I'd list 5 synonyms for each one. And it was a late game, so they added a lot of words on deadline that I didn't have to come up with myself.
You know, Mike Sando, you hear from Mike Sando of The Athletic as well with us every Friday. So good to hear from you, Mike. There was a time earlier this season where I hit that wall with the Seahawks run defense and offensive line. I'm like, I cannot write another game preview where I say, well, the Seahawks have to find a way to not give up 8 yards per carry on the ground and not give up 15% pressure rate on the offensive line. That feels like a little bit of a distant memory, the way things have been going. What did you think when you saw what the Seahawks did against the Cardinals this past week?
Well, they're a top 10 defense now, clearly, and I was even thinking this now. They're the best defense in this division right now, too.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about taking over as a coach, and we've seen these words held against coaches before, like, hey, Ryan Poles gets the Bear job. We're going to be like NFC North football, and we're going to be the best team in this division or whatever. Now, when you're not, then that's held against you. So I think it's pretty good that not only are they the best defense in the division under new coach Mike McDonald, but like you would bet on this defense over the other defenses long term based on the pieces that we've seen. I saw another interesting note. Daniel Jeremiah, who does a great job scouting, he used to work for the Ravens and now he's in media. This just struck me a few days ago. He said something come out of the game. The Seahawks have the deepest wave of pass rushers in the league. Well, my goodness. I mean, that's not the types of things we've heard about Seattle. Like, it just, I guess after I thought about it, I said, well, I guess he's right. But I've been so conditioned to not think that. I thought, wait, in the whole league? You would say that about the Seahawks? That somebody independent, who's watching the whole league and isn't in this market would just say a statement like that. To me, then that validates the initial reactions of the game, which, Dave had the great line in his column. It's not the Legion of Boom yet, but it's the baby boomers. I thought that was a great line. So, you'd normally think, oh, come on, they've just played a month of good defense. But I think you can kind of see, like there's something to this. It's pretty good.
Well, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but let me read something to both of you and to folks here, because I think this was just a wonderful twisting of phrases here. Comes from a writer I really respect. Says this was about the game last week for the Seahawks and the Cardinals. Says, from that height, they may have been able to get a clearer view of their future. In some ways, they're starting to resemble the early stages of the legendary Legion of Boom era. Too early, still collecting evidence, all of that. So these may turn out to be something less than the new generation of Legionnaires, and the recent streak of success may prove to be a function of lesser opposition. But it's fair to point out, over this recent stretch of 4 straight wins, they easily could be considered a gang of baby boomers. The Hawks collected their fourth straight win and kept their points total among NFL leaders during that stretch to 17.6 per game. The Seahawks under Pete Carroll averaged 14.4 and 17.3 points scored against them during 12 to 15. But in 2011, as the Legion was first mastering its marching orders, they averaged 19.7 points a game. That was done by our very own Dave Boling. Wonderful bit of writing that we can expect from you. What brought that to in your mind to start with that?
Just watching these guys, Witherspoon particularly, I think is maybe the MVP of this team for the way he plays. He has a competitive audacity that reminds me of Richard Sherman. And when you put those films on, you can't help but watch Witherspoon. And you know when they're playing that during film sessions, people are howling because he is just like he did in the one on the Kobe Bryant interception return. You know, he down there blocking one after another guys, and he plays every play like that. And so that reminded me, and then again last week, the last Cardinals possession, the game was decided. It was a 2-score game. They're playing soft coverage, keeping everything in front of them. Kyler Murray brings them down the field until they get into the red zone. And these guys, it just seemed organic. They refused to let them score. Doesn't matter what's going to happen in the outcome of the game. They did not want them to get on the board and get some more points against them. And they played like their hair was on fire and ended up with a 16-yard sack. And that really showed me something about the character of the defense, particularly. And you wonder how it's developed. Like you say, a few weeks ago, you can't say those things. You build a roster, it's puzzle pieces. And you're putting a puzzle together. If you get enough of those pieces, the total view comes into shape. And then you see what you've got. And I think that's what this process has been with Leonard Williams stepping up. I think he's a second half All-Pro. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Now, what does he do? He lifts Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed. You see Derek Hall in that last game. Mm-hmm. He benefits from those interior guys and Mafe. And Reed benefits from Witherspoon and the safeties. Julian Love is lifting there. They have an influencer of effort at every level. And Ernest Jones was the keystone piece that was added to the puzzle. Yeah. Unbelievable the difference he's made.
Analysis. Yeah, great analysis. Because I feel like we saw that from Witherspoon in flashes last year. And my concern from a Seattle standpoint was that it would just kind of be lost because eventually you need everyone to come along with you, right? And one guy just can't do it all. And I felt like there were times along the way where I thought, where is he a little bit? Just because the defense is bad, what can you do? But now he's got other guys on the team kind of playing like that, and it makes all the difference. Like their defense actually plays like that.
Well, you wrote a great bit on this in your Pick Six column, Mike, on The Athletic, and you were talking about posed the question whether the Mike Macdonald is bringing the Ravens to Seattle with what he's done, and you talked a lot about what you've seen from Ernest Jones, and obviously the parallels that we've talked about with Mike Macdonald about when he acquired Roquan Smith and how similar some of those things are. I think one of the fascinating parts of this story that's still undertold is Mike Macdonald flew across the country as the youngest head coach in the NFL, first-time head coach, period. Brought 0 Ravens from that defense that he had coached before. No one on this defense had known his system that he could work with. He brought 0 coaches with him from the Ravens. He assembled a staff, and they've had to go through that. For him to do what he's done, it's I think exceeded what he did in Baltimore because of those two things. He entered in Baltimore with a group that had been together, that had been brought together under Wink and some of the other people that had a staff that was like, this is different and I think more impressive.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that either.
Great point, because If you go back to Pete in the early days, huge roster turnover, but there were USC guys peppered in there. Holmgren would brought in a few guys, the Derek Mays or whoever, guys who had played with him that knew how he wanted to do it. Hasselbeck eventually,
That's right.
You brought in people that already knew sort of the words to the song, right? So it made it easier to try to sing. That's really a good component, because I think when they moved on from Pete Carroll, as difficult as it really was a statement of, what, we think we have some good young pieces here, and we just need a change to bring out of it, right? And so, this last month, you can actually have evidence to say, oh, it looks like they do.
And it seems like it's not just a short trend to me. Yeah. It feels like the foundation is being built with these young guys.
100%. And it also, I have to admit, I got a special little pleasure out of the quotes that you were using in your article, Mike, about the question I'd asked Ernest Jones about what it's like to hear Mike McDonald in his headset, in his helmet. And you had those in there. It made me smile because I thought Ernest Jones, like, his answer there was super illuminating. I'm curious what caught your attention there.
Yeah, no, it did. When I do the Pick Six column, I don't always have time, to listen to all the press conferences. But on this one, I really wanted to, because I have felt like at times, and we picked up on this a little bit, just hearing interviews, that the players sort of feel like their play caller on defense, McDonald, kind of can see around the corner. Like they feel like he's almost setting them up. And I think a big part of coaching we've talked about is the players have to feel like you can make them better, right? It's not just about being a good guy or a motivator or the best scheme. They have to feel like you can really help them. So I thought that was, along with the other evidence that caught my attention to use in the piece, of that they feel like he's out in the field with them, almost like you can trust the caller a lot more in a big moment when he's been right before, I guess is what I would say. So this quote, I don't know if you were there. Was that what he was saying, kind of? That?
Yes, it was 100% what he was saying. He was also talking about the fact, I think he's said there's 4 or 5 different coaches that have linebacker backgrounds, so that when they miss something, they get it's like that Office Space moment where like 10 people come to check your TPS report. Like,
it's a great movie.
They get the linebackers get a lot of coaching, but I mean, it's funny because you guys would know better than me, but I find myself to be evaluating the person and not just the player or not just the coach. And Ernest Jones, when he walked through the door, there was just something about him where there was just a calm confidence. He was not trying to prove anything to anybody. He was not really thrown by being traded for the second time in a year. Like, even before I'd seen him play on the field for the Seahawks, I was like, this guy's someone I'm really interested in how he can influence that locker room, which admittedly has a lot of young guys. And the secondary especially has a lot of like silly energy. Like Reek Woolen is like, not the most serious guy you're going to find out there. And so I think he's had just, not just a settling influence to the on-field play, but I think he's all of a sudden the guy that's always doing press conferences. He's going to become, I think, the voice and the steadying force of that defense. So this may become one of the best trades that John Schneider will have made during his career.
And that works because he's out there scraping and filling the gaps, and he's getting to each sideline, and he's making the tackles no deeper than 5 yards. Think about what that requires a guy to do, and the hands and the instinct on that interception against Arizona just shows you the depth and breadth of his talent. When have the Seahawks been their best defensively? When you got Lofa Tatupu stepping in from day one, knowing that defense and being in charge of it. And I think Pro Bowl first 3 years in a row, Bobby Wagner coming in, taking over. And for all the outrageous personalities they had on that team, on that defense that made them great, Bobby Wagner was just that sort of quiet, excellent man in the middle that kept it together and made everything work. I think that Ernest Jones could be that guy.
You know,
Well,
it's
yeah.
go ahead,
I was going
Mike.
to say it's going to be fitting too because with the Rams winning last night, the last game of the year this year is against the Rams. And
Uh
that's
huh.
where he's coming from. So you can kind of see a story developing here.
You
And
absolutely
he's played the
can.
Packers once already this year and had 12 tackles against Green Bay when he was with the Titans. So,
That's a great point. That's a
boy,
great
going
point.
into this game, I think he's really going to be somebody they can lean on.
Well, as you guys were as you were talking about that, Dave, and talking about some of those past pieces, it made me think of another thing that was interesting about Mike McDonald. That's a tie to Pete Carroll, which is Pete Carroll. One of the things that worked for him when he came back to the NFL with the Seahawks is he also valued different positions and different body types than anyone else at that point. Like, so he all of a sudden, he was the guy that was bringing in tall corners. He was the guy that had safeties at a higher value than some other people and had ways to use them. And Mike McDonald has, I've talked to him about this multiple times this year. He is very quick to point out that he thinks that they have disproven this notion that the middle linebacker is of low value, that the safety is of low value. And we're at a point right now where in the NFL, the Rams literally just made that call. Like, it's not that we don't think Ernest Jones is good. We just don't think that position's worth paying. And so that's an interesting point. If you can catch the league at a point where you see something differently and you're right, that can be a pretty big advantage, Mike, when you're trying to assemble a roster and maybe build something while other people are decaying.
Yes, I need to know more about the Rams' decision though, because it wasn't like I guess pay him, but the Seahawks haven't paid him. They could still be on their team, right? It's interesting to me that he would be available. They have a young defense that's not as good as it has been in the past. It's odd to me. I can understand in free agency if somebody was about to make $14 million a year and you just decided, you know what, we have someone else coming up, appreciate it. But to just, to move like that when you don't have to, there's more to that. So that's just interesting to me. Why would you?
And there's an art to it.
Yeah.
There's an art to it that John Schneider obviously has. Marshawn Lynch was persona non grata in Buffalo. He worked for a month trying to get him on the roster. He did. He changed the entire locker room. It changed the philosophy, the intensity of the entire team, bringing that on. Leonard Williams last year, getting him, keeping him, huge. Ernest Jones, the next step in that, finding somebody that you can get who for some reason is on unsolid footing. There's a genius to that, and I think that really is a kudo to John Schneider.
I mentioned for a second there decay, and that got me back to last night's game. So we're going to take a quick detour back to the Rams versus the 49ers. How far the mighty have fallen. The 49ers in that game were I will need the thesaurus, Mr. Boling, because it was disgusting. And Brock Purdy, especially, yes, there was rain, but even when it stopped raining, all of a sudden, like, that guy looked like he's not an NFL starter in that game. And Deebo Samuel certainly does not look like he is an NFL starter in that game. And then you have Dre Greenlaw, who outright refuses to play in the game.
Devondre Campbell, yeah.
Devondre Campbell. Thank you. Sorry. So the linebacker, Devondre Campbell, who refused to play in that game. What's going on, Mike, with that 49ers team?
Well, the Purdy stuff, I wondered if he was hurt, except he played a great game last week. And now we've seen a couple bad winter games, another one in Buffalo where he looks like he's on the JV, really didn't look like a starter. So I think that this whole thing off of this game, to have it go like that, where a player refuses to go in, right, where your quarterback looks terrible, where nothing seems to go right, I feel like that could be a flashpoint or the type of thing that is, especially if it's followed up by more performances like that, where you have a little bit more of a challenge in the offseason or a little bit more of a need for change. I think the quarterback situation with the contract will be a big story of the offseason for them. And what are you going to do? Maybe they can get him at a lower rate, or maybe they wait. But this is the second time they've went to a Super Bowl and then were really bad the next year. I think the difference this year is while they've been injured, I don't think it's quite as bad as last time where they lost Bosa in the second game, I believe, and they lost their starting quarterback, in the first 5 or 6 games. So this feels a little different.
Nobody's
not only
happy.
that, not only that, but they paid Brandon Ayuk, who's now injured. They paid Christian McCaffrey, who's now injured again. They paid Trent Williams, who's now injured. And so you've got an aging George Kittle's aging Deebo Samuel. Like, it feels like they are in a potentially really bad spot because now, Dave, you're going to have to make a decision. I have to admit, I've been a Brock Purdy believer from pretty early on. I've not been among the group that's like, he's all a Shanahan creation. That game was really disturbing if you believe Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. He was not a good quarterback in that game.
You see these cycles. We just had the Rams go through it from Super Bowl to basement, and I think this was one of the great unappreciated talents of Pete Carroll to keep them from hitting bottom. He somehow, and there might be seasons where they were losing like 5 of 6 or 7 or something like that. And by the end, they kind of climbed up over the Cardinals and stayed competitive. And that works against you. Especially once your roster starts aging, then you're not getting the high draft picks to plug in and rebuild. And that was genius. And maybe in the end, it was kind of the undoing that you were just staying at that level. And it was beautiful to do it for competitive reasons. And at the end of the year, you can say, well, it wasn't too bad. But nobody ever thought they were going to the Super Bowl the way they were headed.
Yeah.
And
I think. Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Mike. I picked you, Mike. Go ahead.
So the other thing is, I think a lot of times one of the reasons I don't really write too much about scheme, I think it's great and all of that, but Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, they're known as these schematic gurus. You got to have players, and there's no magic scheme to make the 49er offense be able to work no matter what, or McVay either. He went through a lull, right? And then they've got good players again, they've built their team up. So I think that's an interesting part of it too in the division is that Kyle Shanahan's this amazing schemer, and it can still look really bad.
Well, that's an underrated part of the game last night to me is Kyle Shanahan, good or bad, has been able to create open throws for whether it was Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo or, any number of quarterbacks. I can't even remember their names that have played for him. But there were, to give Purdy a little bit of an out, there weren't open players. There was not a lot of schemed, open, easy throws that are kind of what Shanahan's known for. So that was a little bit concerning if you're a 49ers fan.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other piece of this, as we kind of broaden out to the NFC West in general, the Rams are going to get plaudits for, winning that game. They were barely better. Matt Stafford threw multiple passes that should have been intercepted, that were dropped. They managed to beat what was a very bad 49ers team last night. Matthew Stafford's 36. He does not look. I know how he played against Buffalo. I've seen many more games that look like the one against the 49ers this year. And then I look at Arizona, who is maybe hey, they were coming into the last few weeks as maybe the young rising team. I think you got to really wonder about that team. You still got questions about Kyler Murray. I kind of look across this division and I'm looking ahead the next 2 or 3 years.
Seahawks.
The Seahawks
who would you rather
seem
be?
The team better ready to step forward. Did you guys? Is that just a hometown perspective?
No, I think so too. And then so many eye openers. Zach Charbonnet. He looks like a first team guy to me. I thought his efforts were. He's always been a high effort guy, and he played his role really well. When I saw him breaking through that line and putting on the Jets, I think that was something that I didn't expect. And I'm a big proponent of Kenneth Walker III. I think he does some magical things out there. If the guy could stay healthy and get a little bit more in the way of room to run, some of those 3-yard gains that he makes, he may be throwing a linebacker off his shoulders or doing a somersault to break free from a tackle. He's got a little bit. He kind of reminds me of a young Gale Sayers in some ways, where
Wow.
you just
Bowling.
at times,
Yeah.
I'm saying there are little indicator moments when the guy does something that, like when Barkley did that reverse, jump over the diving safety. Kenneth Walker does some of those things at times, and then maybe he overbounces sometimes.
Yeah.
He's still a work in process. He has some physical skills that, if things come together for him, hey, we've seen so many running backs look great for over short stretches for the Seahawks, and then get beaten up or worn down from not having any blocking. But you see those guys, and then you see Kobe Bryant, another revelation. Why is he's finding a place to fit in with all those other guys playing well? And it is the causa sui. It generates itself, and that's momentum, and that's competitiveness. And it's a leverage that good players have on the other players in the locker room. And I think that's what we're seeing with this team. You're a team on the rise.
What are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I think we'll find out how much so in the next two games. They're going to play Green Bay and Minnesota from the most dominant division in the last 55 years. And it'll, if these things are true, which I think they look like they're true, you're winning at least one of those games. And I think this one Sunday night against a young, good Packers team is a great barometer, a greater barometer than playing the Cardinals, or really almost the 49ers right now, right?
Yes.
The other teams that have beaten recently. There's no doubt the Seahawks are playing well. I think they got some really good signs on offense against the Cardinals. But, the Packers beat the Cardinals pretty bad too. So this is more of a, hey, you're under the lights against a team that's got a really good record that some people before the year were picking to, make a push in the playoffs, that won a playoff game last year. So let's see what that looks like now. Then if these things are true, they should probably win the game at home.
Yeah, well, they have had some opportunities to step up in prime time this season, and they have generally not done that so far this year. So this feels like we talked about after the bye. It really did feel like version 2.0, at least of the defense, and I think it's also an emerging story that's version 2.0 of the offense and the offensive line, and that's been a little bit later to come, but it's going to be interesting. But I'm curious for both of you, this notion of becoming great, like especially like it happens as a player, but it happens as a collective, as a team as well. And I'm curious if like, you've seen the what became the Super Bowl 2005 Seahawks. You saw the rise of the 2013 Seahawks. You've seen other teams rise to be great over the years. Do you generally think it like happens in a moment? Does it happen in an off season? Does it happen over multiple seasons? Like, at what point do you kind of recognize, okay, no, this team is now great?
I go back to indicator moments again, and there were certain games, of course. Once you saw Walter Jones and Steve Hutchinson and Robbie Toback and Chris Gray and whoever was going to be at the right tackle, just
Sean Locklear, let's give him his due.
Give him his due. Just demolish people. Child's play. They were toying with defenders. You watch that, and that was a more gradual thing. With the next group, the big moment was a game in Chicago when they just got Marshawn. To me, when he made a 3-yard gain that should have been a 6-yard loss. It was the most incredible 2-yard run. And I talked to the offensive lineman after that game, and they said, we got to push. He's going to run over us too. And I think that, and it took a long time for that to take effect. Pete was under 500 and probably his job, in peril after the Dallas game the third year. Russell Wilson against Chicago leading 2 scoring drives in the fourth quarter and overtime. I think everybody on the field said, man, he threw the touchdown to Sidney Rice. It was, okay, this guy is not just a rookie who's coming in looking good. This is something very, very special. And I think another year, I think it was the next year maybe, they were at Houston, and I can't remember who was the quarterback, one of their plug-in guys, but Dan Quinn knew how if they brought Cam Chancellor up to rush the quarterback with a safety blitz, he would always automatically go to a wideout that would run an out pattern or whatever. Richard Sherman knew exactly what was going to happen on that play, picks it off, loses his shoe, runs 70 yards or something. Okay, that wasn't just an athletic play. That was perfectly designed and executed, and it was a big game, and these were spectacular moments that everybody in that locker room knows it. Everybody feels it, and it is generated by itself.
I think you usually see some real big scores. Okay, if we go back to the 2012 Seahawks, right? They win their final 5 games. There's a 58-0. There's a 50-17 on Buffalo. Where remember they did was that the game they did the fake punt when they were way ahead?
That was in Toronto. Yeah, I was there for that game.
Yeah. And then they beat the 49ers 42-13. Okay, that's that you had a good feeling at that point that this was a different type of a team. And when I look at the 05 team, I think and I'm going to call it up here. I think there was a similar sort of thing where you're on this. They went on this really long win streak late in the year. I think they rested starters in the last game against Green Bay.
The Packers, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, but there's scores in there. They go to Philly and they win 42-0. They beat the 49ers, who were bad, 41-3. There's another one in there, 42-10 on Houston. You really see, and they maybe they're close to that against the Cardinals, but I think you really start to see some games like that where they're just a juggernaut a little bit, right? I think those are the ones that come into play sometimes when you're really taking a next step.
I think that's a really good one, because it's this notion of being overwhelming. That feels like it's needed at some point to be great. And I think it's the interesting thing with just taking the 2005 Seahawks, or that era Seahawks, versus the Pete Carroll era Seahawks, was the 2005 squad. It felt like they had a specific recipe that they could come back to, that they didn't have to be that varied. They didn't have to have a myriad of ways to beat you. They just were kind of going to 3rd and 1. You know exactly where the ball is going to go and who's going to have it, and you're not going to be able to stop us.
And defense was the same thing.
Right. And Pete Carroll's team, for me, felt very different in that they could beat you any number of ways. They could beat you. People forget that was the best special teams in the NFL that year. Heath Farwell and they had a bunch of guys that would make plays on special teams.
They had starters.
Defensive players were playing on
starters begging to be on. Their kickoff gunners were Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, because they wanted to see who could get down there and get the tackle first.
Yeah.
That's when you got it clicking.
Yeah. So I asked that because no one's going to say the Seahawks team right now is great. I don't think that makes any sense to say that right now. But since this bye situation, since they've recouped it, this is, if not the best defense in the NFL by a number of metrics, it's the second best. It's right there. If you look at what percentage of their drives are resulting in points for their opponents, it's number 1 in the NFL, 25% of their drives. They've been right there with the Eagles on any metric you want to look at over this course of time. And everybody's talking about this Eagles defense. It feels to me like this game against the Packers are an excellent offense. I think Matt LaFleur is one of the, I wouldn't say most underrated, but people will go, they don't go to him when they talk about great offensive coaches. They talk about Shanahan, they talk about McVay, they talk about Andy Reid, they'll talk about a bunch of guys before they get to LaFleur. I think this guy has done amazing work this year. I mean, what he did with Jordan Love out earlier, winning with Malik Willis. And anyway, I could go on and on. This matchup is strength versus strength. And if the defense can actually look like the stronger of those units, I think that will be a pretty big moment in kind of the maturation of the Seahawks team.
I look at the line of scrimmage. If the Seahawks can push them back, who dominates the line of scrimmage really says a lot about who's going to win the game in my mind.
Yeah. I think it's a great matchup too. And if the Seahawks at their worst this year just couldn't stop the run, and you lose all control of the game. And I think if you say, what are you afraid of when you play Green Bay? They're a really well schemed run game with a pretty good offensive line. And they got Josh Jacobs, who runs with anchor. He's a physical back who really, you watch him and you think this guy really wants to play. So you're right. It is that's more of an established strength against an emerging strength for Seattle. Great test, big game, national focus. I'm really interested to see what Seattle brings. I think that's another interesting thing too. Is Pete Carroll was always about every game's the same. They're all championship moment. I think Mike McDonald's like a little bit more recognizing of this is a big one this week. So we'll see. What it looks like when are they going to have the hair on fire like Dave mentioned earlier?
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting as well. There's kind of the styles makes fights piece to this, where the Packers offense. I'm going to actually be working on an article on this after I get off with you guys. But early downs, like everybody in the NFL tends to, like, the focus has always been third downs, red zone, like these specific situational football. But early downs is a really good indicator of how good an offense or a defense is. Well, it turns out the Packers are the number one most efficient early down offense in the NFL, and they're the heaviest run-centric early down offense. And it used to be years ago, all the analytics nerds were saying early down passing is what you've got to do because everyone's gearing up to stop the run on first and second down. And so there's all these guys passing a lot. Well, that's Ryan Grubb. The Seahawks are one of the past heaviest early down offenses. So the Seahawks, for what it's worth, are the number 2 early down defense since week 9. So there's this real interesting battle there. And there's this interesting style of what is the Seahawks offense? This is really potentially week 3, I would say, of have they found a running style that can actually complement what is a pretty effective passing game. Still number 2, I think, in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game.
Getting Lucas back has helped.
Yeah.
Right tackle.
What's your take on him and Satawa Lamea and these kind of old, like almost Redskins style counter trays that they've been running?
I like it. You get a little bit different angles. It's a little bit different look. And I particularly in the Cardinals game, I think they are scheming advantages, and it's working. They're going quads and DK and then motioning in or out of it, and to force defenders to make decisions, and then you make the read, and that makes their decision wrong. And I think that has worked. I like Abe Lucas because I see him as a battler. When he's really at his best, he's one of the quintessential type right tackles. He will bury somebody. And who do you need? You don't need Walter Jones over on the right side. In some ways, you need a Brenna Giacomini if he could keep from false starting. A mauler
or personal fouling.
Who is that one great guy? Chris Terry, remember?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He was a mauler, and they're a little bit enforcers. The right tackles are your enforcers. They set your tone. They pound you. They run you, and they bury you in the ground. He has that capacity, and it's a toughness that line can use. The kids at right guard, this guy looks pretty good, but then I saw him. Tell me his last name again. Lamea. Okay.
They call him Tawa.
I was going to call him Tawa too. Yeah. Like in one instance, I don't know how they get to the NFL without understanding if your man crosses this way, somebody's going to be coming at you. And to get caught up with the tackle, 2 guys on one, when they do a
twist.
Tackle in twist, somebody's coming at you, and I saw him do that. What he has better than, say, Bradford, he's got a better setup. He's more balanced. His hands are in front of him. His ass is down. Too many of the guys, Bradford particularly, was top heavy. And then once you start moving, you're not set up and able to take on the rush and make the good punch.
That's such a great observation.
There's something
I've
there.
Seen that. Yeah. Sorry. Finish your thought, Dave.
No. But it's a simple thing. And if a guy, okay, watch the films here. He's leaving. So they're not just going to give you the playoff. Somebody's coming.
Yeah.
And if not, then start looking for work.
Yes.
And so it's again, this guy was not highly considered, and he's in there and he's doing a pretty decent job so far. Like Olu, I think, has had to pick up his game. You put him in there now, you're the guy. You're the guy here. You're pro now. You're not in the background. You're not coming in for a play or two. You are the man, and that's when you see what a guy has in him. And I think Olu might be the guy to come in and stick in there for a while. Maybe that guard's going to be the same.
Yeah, Mike. I think Dave makes a great point about the balance piece. There's a lot of times where Anthony Bradford would just get beat right off the snap, and he'd be lunging one direction. It looked very, very bad, and it happened a lot.
Can't recover.
It seems a little bit more balanced, but it seems like a bit of a choice that the Seahawks have made here, and a lot of repetition, where there's two kinds of styles of runs that they've kind of gone to. One is this counter. These are both gap kind of scheme plays. The other is what people call duo, where you double teaming. They did that a lot against the Jets. Both of those are very physical, we are going to like manhandle you kinds of plays. And it feels like that's not been as common in the NFL of late, and maybe is becoming more in vogue. Like it'd been a lot more like zone running for many years.
Yeah, but it's trended back a little bit. I'd have to look at the whole league, but like the Rams, went to more of that the last year or two than they had been in the past. So I do think there has been a push to it. I know the Seahawks have felt, like I think they've wanted to go more in this direction, and now are, and then they realized it would take some time to, get everybody on. We still haven't really seen, Kenneth Walker that many games of it. So I think it was a great encouraging sign that it hit last week, and now you have a little bit more incentive to stick with it, right? It's hard to stick with something when it's not giving you immediate results. I think that was kind of the fear of trying this, is like, how long do you wait for it to work? But they got enough of a reward, I think, against Arizona to now be excited about it. And if is Walker going to play?
We'll find out more today. He has not practiced yet this week, so it's been Mike McDonald's called him day to day, but they got some good news earlier this week. So at least if he's out this week, it doesn't sound like he'll be out for much longer.
Yeah, so I think it was great to actually get the production without him, because now he has to look at he almost has to live up to that standard that it's there. The blocks are there, so I like that they've gone to that and didn't just stick to what they were doing before, and it looks like it's giving them something.
We haven't mentioned JSN, who I think is another of those young influencers who with his game, he picks others up. And that's not a knock on DK, because he does the same thing too. This guy's hands are really remarkable, and that the catch that he made moving away from it at his shoe tops on a crucial down, that's a rare talent. And I think we mentioned one time, I think it was the Rams game, when he would have had 250 yards receiving or something if it weren't for holding calls on the line. I just think he's turning into a star, but I think he's on the verge of the threshold of maybe being league-wide noticed.
All right. Last thing I wanted to chat with you guys about before we'll maybe get a story, if one of you want to prep a story about each other, or one of you. Geno Smith, got to talk. Eddie, if this was a radio show, I would have had to talk about the quarterbacks first, because that's all anyone wants to supposedly hear about. I don't care about ratings. We're just going to talk about things that matter. So, but I think we do have to talk about Geno Smith, because this is a guy who has still nationally the reputation that is not as strong, and this is going to be a game that everyone's going to see. It feels like he's finally got there. There's times in that game against Arizona, I don't know if you guys noticed, he almost did like a double take when he was able to get to his third read and not have someone in his lap. He didn't know what to do with that. And it turned out he checked the ball down at the highest rate he had all season, and they benefited from that. And so this is another zone heavy team. He's going to have to be patient. He's going to have to take some of those plays. What do you guys think is on the line for Geno Smith this week, other than just obviously winning the game?
Well, I don't feel like he's. I don't think he's like teetering on the edge of not having it go bad, but I think it's a great opportunity to build upon what was how many times before has he had no turnovers and no sacks in a game? Didn't they say
I'll tell you,
it's
a good question.
No, it was. I saw something on that. It might be like the first time or the third time or something. To eliminate keep the negative plays down, which you have a chance to do when they're not in your lap every play. But yeah, I think that's an interesting. I think that there's a lot to gain for him down the stretch here, playing these couple good teams in the NFC West or in the NFC North. But I'm not feeling. I don't know where you're going with the question. Like, do you think that if he just played the way he's played so far this year, or do you think that he'd be imperiled in some way, or what do you think?
I guess what I am getting at is when I ask what's on the line is both the opportunity and the potential risk. Like, if it may be more on the opportunity side. If he goes out and plays a big game and outplays Jordan Love in this game, what could that mean? If he goes out and has another stinker where he throws a red zone interception that crucially kills them in this game, what will that mean for him? I'm just kind of curious if you guys think it feels like a high leverage game for Geno Smith and his reputation.
Oh yeah. I think what maybe last week showed, and you brought this up, is an understanding he doesn't have to make heroic plays. He doesn't have to make the hero throws. And some of those are what got him in trouble, and some of them were just making a bad decision. But there are a couple times too when you see like DK turning up a route thinking it was going to go deep rather than, there have been communication, and when they say communication, it doesn't mean, hey, you got to go here. It's how they read the defense and what is going to be open. And I think some of those have led to some of his problems. But, they use the term game manager or whatever. Russell was at his best when he didn't have to make this spectacular play. And it took him a while to learn, take what they're giving you. Mm-hmm. That's a win. Take sometimes you throw it out of bounds. That's a win for what it could have turned into. And I think he's 34, and he's still kind of got a low mileage. And you see that he gets out, he can run still. I think he's playing smarter, and he is evolving with the offense. And sometimes one goes here, and it takes a while for the other one to catch up. I think maybe this is what we're seeing from him now, and it's a good development.
Yeah, so 5th career start with no sacks or no turnovers for him.
3rd for the Seahawks.
3rd for the Seahawks, and 2nd against Arizona this year. So maybe there's something about the Cardinals.
I think the other one was actually last game of last season, even though it's in 2024. It was the
you're right.
Game.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm looking at the date. You're right. Yep,
yes,
yep.
I've made that mistake
one in
myself.
Each year. He's one in each year for the Seahawks. You're correct.
Yes.
So when I think of the stakes for him, look, if he plays especially well or especially poorly down the stretch, I think that's important. But let's just say that he's going to be. I think he's been generally good. Then I think what it comes down to, I think what could be super impactful would be, what's your feeling after a playoff game? Right? That's where things really get magnified. Do we have a guy that we can advance with? Did he hold us back in the biggest game? So maybe from that standpoint, if we're feeling a little bit down the stretch here, like these are kind of a little bit playoff games, stepping up in class with the NFC North, right? Do you feel like you have a guy who can beat these guys and make some big plays? I think we've certainly seen that he can make the plays. So maybe these big moments are different, and especially remember it's with a new coach. So whatever he did in the past isn't really on Mike McDonald's mind, right? He may be watching this to see.
That's a great point, and that's kind of what it feels like to me. Is that right now, he has not yet been in a situation, I feel like, where he's had a defense and an offensive line and a surrounding team around him that it was really like even fair to say, can he beat the 49ers? Like the 49ers have been juggernauts for years. I thought that was a ridiculous thing to put on Geno. They were 3 times more talented than the Seahawks the last few years, right?
Yeah.
This is a moment like the Packers are 9-4. The Seahawks are 8-5. The Packers have faced the Lions twice, the Eagles, and the Vikings. Those are the best teams they've faced. They're 0-4 against those teams.
Yeah.
So this is not a juggernaut that they're facing. It's a very good team. They have a very good quarterback who's well respected, and it's on prime time. So this is a chance for Geno to kind of say, no, I am not going to be a limiting factor for how good this team can be. That's what I think's on the line for Geno this week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It should be a really interesting matchup. So, last question I'm going to ask you guys.
Well, I got one for you.
Go ahead.
Guess how many times Russell Wilson had no turnovers and no sacks in his whole career?
Including past the Seahawks.
Yeah, including. In fact, I'm going to add in the playoffs just to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. 5.
4, so it's a rare thing. He takes sacks, that's why. I was looking on Geno, had 5 of them, so Russell had 4. But the sack component, because Russell added so much scrambling, he would hold the ball and take sacks too. So anyway.
Sorry, I spoiled it.
No, it's good. I was just curious. So
yeah.
Anyway, what was your question?
My question is actually less about you guys individually or telling. You can feel free to tell stories about each other, but I was curious if you had a moment, either one of you or both of you, that was really uncomfortable with a player, where the relationship was really challenging, or you asked a question and got a bad response, or you just had a damaged relationship with a player. It could be a coach as well. Anytime that you just had like a player that you needed to be able to get things from, but it was kind of a prickly pear. It was a hard one to get it from. And anyone that stands out for you guys. You don't have to name names, but I'm curious if you have any stories along those lines.
Do you have a good story, Dave? Because I can think of.
I go way back, and this was, I think, the only time that I kind of got in somebody's face, because he got in my face, was Jim McMahon when he was he with the Chargers toward the end, or Jim McMahon was with somebody, and. Yeah. And I had a question relevant to the game. This was, I don't know, late 80s. I don't know when this was.
I never heard this one. This is good.
But and I went up and I asked him something relevant. It was during the open locker room, and I had my credential. This was part of my job. I saw something that I thought he could offer a perspective, and he said some things that I didn't think were very professional, and that were personal. And I kind of let him know I didn't care for that. And it was a deal where I kind of stood my ground after he added to it, and it was kind of escalating. And I knew it is not my job to go in and raise a fuss, but I'm not going to take this either. And one of his teammates kind of got involved. I would like to think I would have turned around and said, but I was young.
My money would be on Boling in that confrontation with Jim McMahon, just by the way. Boling,
he was being petulant, and I was trying to be professional, and then it kind of crossed the line. And I knew nobody's career is enhanced by getting into it with an athlete. I'm not going to be insulting. I'm going to try to be professional. But you pull that a couple times. that was the only thing.
I love Gentleman Dave that is actually just a roiling cauldron.
No. Maybe somewhere down deep.
I love it.
I got a story though from my. Do you have? Can I?
Oh, Dave just wants me to not say anything more about Dave. You think Dave?
Okay, Mike
Dave's a
Holmgren's
badass dude. Sorry.
Mike
No one
Holmgren's
knows this.
first draft. Mike had a way of punking the rest of the media. He was a genius at this. Mike Holmgren.
I know this story.
Mike Holmgren's first draft, and Mike had made some, and he's an impressive guy. Mike's a really imperious.
You're talking about Holmgren, not me.
monolithic guy,
Both, but we're talking about Holmgren.
And but gentle and kind and intelligent, very articulate, and really surprisingly fun for the face that he had on the sideline. Really a fun guy.
But at the time, Dave, set this up. At the time, we hardly got access to him early on, so you got very few chances as a reporter early on to make your impression with Holmgren. So each one of them had a lot of value for the writers at that early stage.
So Mike Holmgren had said, "Oh, you guys are going to grade me. I know all that, because he'd been through the draft all the time." And so Mike gets everybody. We're waiting for Holmgren to come in for his wrap up, and Mike says, "Hey, we should grade him. He kids us, so we should all hold up a piece of our notebook paper with our grade, and let's all do D's and F's." Oh, that'll be funny, ha ha ha! So I don't know, however many of us were in there in the front row, and he walks in, and we're all holding up D's and F's, and I look at Sando, and he's grinning, and he's got A+. He set us up. It was hilarious. And Holmgren, hey, Sando, yeah, you know what you're talking about. There's a guy with expertise.
Fist bump for Holmgren. Yeah, hey, coach, That is great. Yeah, that was hilarious. That was funny. I remember Claire Farnsworth was at the Seattle PI there. There's not a nicer guy in the world than Claire. Claire just looked at me like, what are you doing? That's funny.
Amazing.
That was funny. I forgot that one. That was great. Yeah, Holmgren.
I'm tempted to end there, but Mike, I want to give you the stage if you've got one that you want to share.
I found Dave's column, by the way, with the Thesaurus. It was 1992. That season.
Yes.
It was a 16-13 overtime game where each team missed multiple field goals in overtime, I believe, or at least one. So a reader had contacted Dave and said, "I've been enjoying the coverage of the Seahawks because I keep wondering how many different ways you can come up with to say they really stink," because they were horrible in '92, worst offense league history. So Boling, some great turns of phrase here. He says, when Coach Tom Flores took over the Seahawks, he suggested the team would run the offense of the '90s. If he was talking about the 1890s, that was true. And then he put in parentheses after true, accurate, authentic, believable. If he meant 1990s, that was pure drivel. And then there's a bunch of words, baloney, bull, bunk, and it goes through the whole thing. In fact, it goes through the whole thing, including I'm going to go over to the continued part here because owner Ken Behring, whom the fans see as incredibly cheap, in parentheses, chintzy, sleazy, trashy, because this whole thing is great. They're 2-10, so he goes through the whole thing about this terrible game, and with these parenthetical references. Kelly Stauffer threw 2 interceptions and fumbled the ball. Globe, orb, sphere, twice. He played as if his helmet, cap, hat, protective device was lodged somewhere in the vicinity of his posterior, backside, buns, rump, tush. A situation that makes it hard for a quarterback to see, glimpse, look at his receivers. And it all goes on and on, just becoming more and more ridiculous through the whole thing. So I found that was the genesis.
It was a strain to come up with stuff.
Oh, constraint is the mother of invention, and you had very few things to write about and produce something amazing out of it. That's amazing. I love that.
It was great. It's very funny.
Well, that has been another reason why everybody loves this show with both of you. So thanks to Dave Boling. Make sure you check out his work on the Spokesman Review. Mike Sando of The Athletic at Sando NFL on Twitter. Mike, anything that people should be looking forward to coming from you coming up this weekend?
Well, I had fun this week kind of diving into the Chiefs' streak of amazing 15 straight wins in games that were decided by a touchdown or less, and found some interesting stuff. I thought it was interesting on how they sort of win these games, what the likelihood of doing it, some of the keys to them late in the games. So that's on The Athletic. I think the headlines along the lines of, can Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs keep this up, or keep getting away with this, that sort of a thing. That was a
Oh,
fun,
wait a
fun
second.
look for me.
I forgot something. Hold on. You guys got to hold on for one
Yeah.
second. I got to figure out if I can find it. Here, I think this is it. There's a voicemail from somebody who specifically wanted to ask you guys a question. So let me see if I can get this. If you guys can hold on one second.
Hey, after I'll just I can fill the space, because after that reader asked, it would marvel at Dave's ability to come up with all these different ways to describe how bad the Seahawks are. Dave said, "Thank you, caller. And did you sit next to the guillotine during the French Revolution and knit booties as well?" So it was he was comparing the Seahawks season to the French Revolution with guillotines. It was
I love it. Well,
anyway.
Beware that this triggers something that not everybody loves. This is the voicemail jingle before we get to the voicemail.
Time to rise and shine, it's clear. HB Mornings voicemails here. Lay and laugh, let go of fear. Start your day with cheer, my dear.
All right, so that is the AI jingle that everybody loves. And this is the voicemail. It comes from Matt for Dave and Mike.
What up, 12s? Old school Seahawk here. Nothing makes a Blue Friday better than Mike and Dave. The love and respect that you have for each other definitely comes across, and I personally find it really heartwarming. Your insights are great, and your stories are absolutely laugh out loud funny. I was curious to know, other than each other, who has been your biggest influence in your career, and what was the last book you read? Appreciate you, gentlemen. Let's go, Seahawks.
Thanks to Old School Seahawk for that. Okay, biggest influence and last book you read. Dave, let's start with you.
Biggest influence is tough because I've had so many, and John Clayton's got to go on that list. A lot of guys that I've worked with through the years. I wouldn't want to list influences because there's way too many. Last book I read was called Little Warriors by Dave Boling. It's a manuscript that I'm putting out to agents right now. And I kind of do that when I'm not doing this stuff. And it's really consuming. It's so much fun. I get lost in my own worlds. And when I'm writing, I can't read other people because I'm afraid that will change my tone and rhythm.
Interesting.
When I'm writing a long project, I have to stay off other books.
Makes a lot of sense.
And for getting along with Mike, there's only you're really fortunate in your life if you've got somebody who can kind of be a partner with you in something you love and has the same sort of passion and different perspectives, of course, but so much that I respect what he does, and it's been a real gift in my life to have somebody to kind of go through this with.
That's great. Yeah, Dave would be for sure the number one influence. But I'll tell you, teachers change lives. And I would say when I was in high school, as a freshman, I took the newspaper class back then, the school newspaper, whatever. And then after the freshman year, a bunch of my buddies that were in the class dropped it, so I dropped it too. And I'm 14 years old or 15 years old, and so I wasn't going to do it. And the teacher, this guy's name was Leonard Frizzy. And we became friends for the rest of his life, really, after I graduated. But he came into my history class as a sophomore and actually grabbed me by the collar. And you could do these things back then. No, I never thought twice of it. And he marched me down to the registrar's office and he changed my schedule. And he put me in the newspaper class. And he says, "No, you're doing this." I had no choice in the matter. It probably violated some policy. But I don't know what would have happened differently, possibly, if I didn't do that, but he saw something, or he didn't do that to all the other guys, who didn't do it, but he saw something, and that made a big difference to me. And so by the next few years, I became the sports editor of it. And then when I went to college, with no guidance, I had no idea what I was doing. I went to college not knowing anybody, 2 states away, just showed up. That was one of the first things I did was get on the newspaper staff at the college, which I probably maybe wouldn't have done or known to do.
Great story.
And so, that really made a huge difference. In my life, and I've told that story before, but you could just imagine that, a teacher coming in and just saying, no, you're doing this. There was no discussion. He went down and changed my schedule.
It's amazing.
So I
and
thought that was
coaches
all
too,
grateful.
right, Mike? Coaches too, the same sort of influence.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Coaches
Lasts
they can do
forever.
these things. Makes a big, big difference.
And your last book that you've read.
That's embarrassing because I don't read enough of them.
Yeah, same.
In fact, I read the concerning story. It might have been in the New York Times the other day about how, especially, young men in particular don't read fiction anymore. It's a really difficult thing. So, the last book I read was probably a sports book. It's probably on this. It wasn't this season. I mean, it probably last summer. So that's embarrassing to me. But I do a ton of reading. Most of it's online. And I buy books that I have on my stack to get to during vacation, and I'll get to one, but I don't read nearly as many as I should.
Well, understood, and I am the same way. But again, thank you guys for coming on. Make sure you check out Dave's work and Spokesman a review, as well as Mike's work over there at The Athletic. And guys, have a wonderful rest of your Friday and weekend.
Same to you.
All right,
Enjoy
that is Dave Boling and Mike Sando. And folks, if you don't know already, this is a big game this weekend. There are tickets available at amazing prices without paying ticket fees, without paying markups. I've got this ticket registry. There's like 100 tickets available on it at or below face value without having to pay fees. Let's get them into Seahawks fans' hands, and go over to hawkblogger.com, sign up at the ticket registry there. I send out multiple email blasts a day with the updated list of tickets. I'm a little bit I'm excited that we've transferred. We've sold like 50 plus tickets. That's great. We should sell 100 plus tickets. People indicate that they've got money to spend. They want to go to this game. There are tickets at those price ranges. You're not going to get better prices elsewhere. Maybe you will, but I think with fees, I don't think you will. So let's get them sold. Let's get you to a game. So let's get that happening. I'm not taking any cut. I'm just trying to facilitate. I can't guarantee anything. I'm just trying to help connect people. So let's see if we can make that happen. If you haven't already, one thing you can do that would, I think, make a big difference, not only for me, but for you or whoever you buy them for, go over to jkboots.com, use code HawkBlogger, get yourself a pair of JK boots or buy them for somebody. These are an amazing pair of boots by a Washington-based company, Spokane-based, family-owned. Every boot is handcrafted over like 6 weeks. These are not mass-produced things. They will last you. For me, who's not a forest firefighter or a construction worker, they will probably last me the rest of my life. If you are a firefighter or a plumber or an electrician or a police officer, someone who's on your feet all day, these boots can be the difference between like feeling yourself and being able to have a healthy body and just being broken down. So absolutely make sure you use code HawkBlogger, gets you 10% off. Also gets you a chance to wear these, a Seahawks themed pair of boots with gray bison leather, green, as well as blue laces and blue tongue. These are amazing. You'll be the only person on the planet that has a pair just for your feet. And when we get up to 50 sales, which we're closing in on that, we will give away more. So we have some really cool giveaways that we're working on right now. So more on that soon. But it's a great time to buy them. Great gift to give. Also, make sure you go over to ftnfantasy.com. Use promo code HBAM. Gets you 15% off. Also, an amazing gift to give. Pretty affordable gift to give. Less than $8 a month. Buy a full year. So you get this. I think I told you, I don't think this price is going to last into next year. I think they will raise their prices. That's my bet. So get it locked in now. HBAM, 15% off, less than $8 a month. Plus, you can use it for other sports as you go through. It doesn't just have to be for the football season. I personally only use it for football. I'm a subscriber. I use it all year during the draft. I use it during off-season prep, all that stuff. So go over to ftnfantasy.com, use promo code HBAM. All right, everybody, make sure you give the show a like, click subscribe. We're closing in on 14,000 subscribers over on YouTube. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers on TikTok. Would love to get there. I've got a bunch of super chats here. I want to recognize Old School Seahawk has gifted his normal 12 Hawk Blogger memberships. Appreciate you, Old School, as always. Isaac May is a new member. Welcome to the crew, Isaac. So glad to have you. Garth Knight with a super chat. This show is my warm-up for The Price is Right on Fridays. Keep up the energy, gang. Just kidding. Love the content. Corey Hickok has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. If you get one of these free memberships, consider paying it forward, giving one to somebody else. Garth Knight with a super chat says, I kind of wonder if the Rams were pissed the Titans traded EJ back to the NFC West. I would bet they are not happy about it. They do not want to face that guy. I think that's why they traded him for less, to get him out of not only the NFC West, but the NFC Conference. Garth with one last super chat says, in my opinion, nothing beats Amazon Prime with next-gen stats. Such a wonderful view of the running game, along with seeing what is open on the NFL is slim. Appreciate the super chats. Appreciate all of you. Talk to you all soon. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.